a warm welcome to all of you to this afternoon's event, where I'm very happy to say that we have speakers who are going to speak on a very, very important topic for all of us, which is on Afghanistan at the moment. And I'm delighted to say that we have speakers both from within Afghanistan and outside Afghanistan who are very knowledgeable about the topic. So what we're going to do now is to quickly go through a few what we're going to do now is to go through just a set of announcements about how this is going to work for the benefit of the audience, and we'll start off immediately. So thank you for your patience. First, a very warm welcome to so many of you who have shown so much of interest over the last 10 days, 2 weeks since we announced this event, have written to me personally, have written to the center's address, asking for more information, and so many of you who are joining us literally from across the globe and through various time zones. I know that for some of you, it is very early in the morning or even late into the night. So thank you very much. We do these events precisely so that online, so that so many of you can join us. The event is happening on Zoom, but is being live streamed on YouTube. And as you would have seen just now, we've sent out a message on YouTube to show you how you can ask questions through the chat function. If you have any questions, please do type them there. You are welcome to ask questions to an individual panelist. You're equally welcome to pose a question to the entire panel, and I will at irregular intervals pose those questions to them once they've made their initial remarks and we've got the discussion underway. If you would like to tweet, then the Twitter handles are given in the descriptions that appear on your screen at the moment. So please do so. Please do tag our center so we can see what you've tweeted. And also that it's important that I say that had this event been happening on site at LSE, it is a rule at LSE that members of the audience have the right to ask questions without mentioning their name or revealing their identity. In trying to remain as close to that spirit as possible, when I ask questions, I will not be reading out the names of those who are asking the questions. I'll simply read out the questions. So please keep them as short and direct as you can. You're welcome to put in comments as well, which the panelists will get to see later on once they see the YouTube comments, but I will only read out the questions for want of time. We've had a quick chat just before we started off to decide on the order of speakers. And the order in which I'm now going to introduce them is the order in which they will speak. Whilst organizing this event, we were very careful to ensure that we had voices of people who are deeply invested and interested in what is happening in Afghanistan at the moment, and therefore carefully also chose those who are living outside the country and those who are living in the country. In the last several weeks, but also from earlier, as we all know, all of us who are interested and who follow affairs in Afghanistan, there have been a string of announcements, commonly known as laws, as edicts, by the current Taliban government, announcing a variety of measures that have led to a gamut of reactions, both outside Afghanistan and within Afghanistan. The problem for those of us who live outside is that we actually get to hear very little about what is happening inside and what the reactions have been inside. We tend to make assumptions, or worse, we tend to make presumptions. And it is for that reason alone that this kind of a conversation is important. There have been more than 30 such announcements of laws, in search of a better word, which have then been described in a variety of ways, whether as advice or as laws, as I said, and they cover a range of things, from how long a man's beard should be, to music, to the voice of women, to clothes and attire, and so on and so forth. I mean, to the presence of foreigners, the status of non-Muslims. It sort of covers a gamut of things, and I'm sure most of you who are listening would know it. Alongside this, and for a very long time, even before that, has been the whole question of women's education, girls' education and women's education. I say that separately because it has been in the news for much longer than the more recent sets of announcements. And it is a point that deserves and merits a discussion entirely to itself. So we will only be able to speak about it in part today, and for which I apologize in advance, because we did want to have a wider discussion. Now I speak personally, when I was putting this event together and I first started thinking about it, what I really wanted to understand was that in this divergence of views between what those who live outside Afghanistan and are deeply invested in and interested in the country and in the welfare of the country and its people, what they understand of these announcements that are coming out now, and what it is to actually live with those announcements within the country. This was very broadly and very generally speaking the purpose of what I wanted to achieve, and I hope we will achieve some of it today. So please pose your questions accordingly, and I'm sure that we will get some interesting answers, and we can continue the discussion again and again and again. Thank you very much for listening to this rather lengthy introduction from me. It is now my pleasure to introduce the speakers this afternoon. Our first speaker is Saad Mohseni, who is director of Mobi Group, which produces and broadcasts solo news in Afghanistan, along with a gamut of other media organizations. And Saad is author with Jenna Krajewski of Radio Free Afghanistan, a 20-year struggle for an independent voice in Kabul. To put it simply, please read the book. Our second speaker is Mahbooba Siraj, who was until recently director of the Afghan Women's Skills Development Center and founder and president, Organization for Research in Peace and Solidarity. Mahbooba continues with her activism even now, and most importantly, lives in Kabul and has continued to live in Kabul since 2021. Ali Latifi is a journalist based in Kabul, currently Asia editor at the New Humanitarian. Ali also lives in Kabul, and I'm very grateful to him for a conversation we had earlier when I called him to invite him to participate. Finally, we have Kathy Gannon, who was news director of Associated Press for Pakistan and Afghanistan for more than 30 years, and was most recently fellow at the Shorenstein Center at Harvard Kennedy School. Kathy is, of course, very well known as author of Eyes for Infidel, From Holy War to Holy Terror, 18 years inside Afghanistan. Kathy lives in Islamabad. So thank you very much, everyone. We will now start with Saad. Saad, if you could make your initial comments, 6 to 8 minutes, and let us know about the whole question of running a media organization over the years and since 2021. Thank you. Please speak now.
Thank you, Nilanjan, and wonderful to be here with our friends, Kathy, Khanam Mahbooba Siraj, Ali Latifi, to talk about an exceptionally important issue to us and to so many others. 20 years on, after 9/11, so much investment, so much attention, and Afghanistan is on the verge of being forgotten. So every opportunity we have to talk about Afghanistan, we must take these opportunities, and I'm grateful to be here. You mentioned very generously that I've written a book, and in late 2021, I embarked on writing this book because I assumed that our media operations were to get shut down. And it's almost the arrival of the Taliban, it seemed at the time, was like being told by our doctors that we had terminal cancer. And every year, and it's been 3 years that we've survived, it's been a miracle, and we're very thankful and grateful to continue to operate from inside of Afghanistan, and I can explain why. Many people are surprised, even horrified, that we continue to operate from within the country. We employ close to 500 individuals. We operate more than 20 platforms and channels, television as well as radio. And the question we're often asked is, why are you still there? And for us, it's very simple. To be able to report on what's going on inside the country to inform the general public, to educate, and to even entertain, we have to be on the ground. And we are seeing this in terms of our competition, which is based outside, in terms of how their stories are usually, fact checking doesn't usually come into it. They tend to shoot from the hip. They're not able to fact check their stories. They're not able to talk to ordinary Afghans. 42 million individuals and a country as diverse and as complicated as Afghanistan, it's important to have that presence on the ground if possible. Now, I think to an extent we've been lucky that that we have been allowed to operate, and I always end my sentences with "for now." We don't take anything for granted. We we had an extraordinary 20 years post 2001. The Afghan media sector developed like nothing we have seen in Afghanistan. It's been the most successful sector in the 2 decades that followed the fall of the Taliban. Hundreds of television stations and radio stations were established. Thousands of young kids were trained as journalists. Most media outlets spoke truth to power. We managed to inform, educate, entertain, and it's something that I think a lot of Afghans are very proud of. So for us, it was important to see if we could maintain these gains, and to obviously to continue to push back as much as possible. Just on the education, girls' education issue alone, we have done over 1,000 stories since March of 2022, where we've not just interviewed experts from outside, but we've also have amplified the voices of pragmatic religious leaders and even Taliban members in terms of their reasons as to why girls' schools need to reopen. And this has been a very important issue. And even on issues like, for example, human rights, inclusivity, in terms of different interpretations of Islam, there's been, not just us. I think most media outlets have played their role in terms of informing the Afghan public, but also in terms of having this debate on television on a nightly basis. And if you look at the numbers today, something like 10 or 15 million viewers watch our different networks on a nightly basis, which is a significant number of people. And to have that sort of a reach is extraordinary, and we're very thankful to have that. Now, we're not just a bridge between the public and the government, but also a bridge between people outside the country and what's transpiring inside the country. This is how people find out about Afghanistan. There are literally only a handful of foreign journalists now based in Afghanistan, and Ali can probably elaborate on that. The heyday of the early 2000s, where hundreds of journalists were, embedded with the military, living in the provinces, or based out of Kabul. That's no longer the case. So it's also an important role in terms of letting people know what's going on inside the country. Afghanistan is exceptionally fragile. The humanitarian situation has deteriorated. The economic situation is not good. We have a lot of problems, and for people to find out, they need to get information from the country. And we are competing with the likes of Sudan. We're competing with Ukraine. We're competing with so many other hotspots, including Gaza and Palestine. And the world, I could probably say that doesn't have the bandwidth or nor the patience, nor I suppose the appetite to deal with the Afghan dilemma and catastrophe. And this is our obligation to do so. Now, will the Taliban allow us to continue? I mean, we have had our wings clipped. We don't have a lot of entertainment programs in terms of music and soap operas, but we do have chat shows and game shows, comedy shows, cooking shows, travel shows, and so forth. But nonetheless, it's not like it used to be in pre-2021. News, I think we're 90 or 95% there. We can report on most facts. Now, on a lot of issues which they seem as controversial, we obviously cover the stories without much fanfare, but we still cover them. And we continue to interview government officials, and we challenge them on the sorts of issues that I mentioned before. But it's a day by day challenge for us. And our people on the ground are exceptionally courageous. They tolerate a lot of pressure from the authorities. But I think if the change is going to come, it's going to come from within. I don't just mean with the Taliban. I mean that Afghan citizens, including journalists and members of civil society, how we challenge the de facto rulers of the country will have more of an impact than lectures and bullying from the outside. And at the same time, I personally have encouraged engagement with Afghanistan and therefore the Taliban. Engagement doesn't mean recognition. Engagement means talking to them. The movement is not monolithic. There are individuals who are more pragmatic than others. There are individuals who do want to engage with the outside world. And currently, if you look at the Western engagement, it's very limited. It's done at a lower level. It's done with individuals who can travel outside. And myself and my colleagues, but others as well, have encouraged, and I've written about this, it's sort of elevating the level of engagement for people to go to Kabul, for people to meet with not just the Taliban, to meet with civil society, to meet with journalists, to travel through the country. I mean, I'll give one example. My friends at the NRC were telling me that they, after the Taliban ban on Afghan women working for NGOs, they engaged local officials, and they managed to have 65% of their female employees go back to work because they were able to convince individuals that they were dealing with at the local level, as well as Kabul, that this was going to be important for Afghans and effectively for the de facto ruler. So I'll leave it at that. And I'm sure others have things to add as well. But I think Afghanistan should not be forgotten. And the gains of the last 20 years, in order to protect them, I think the world needs to remain engaged.
Thank you very much, Saad. I am going to ask you a couple of questions before we move on to Mahbouba. Is that one is you mentioned musical programs of music and this, that. At the same time, the announcement of bulletins, news bulletins, come with a background music in it. So it's not like music is not available as part of news programs. Except that what I suppose you're saying is there are no music recitals or programs of music, etc. Is that what you are saying when you said that that has been reduced dramatically?
Well, like for example, we had our own version of a pop idol program, Afghan Star, obviously. That's no longer airing. Music clips are not airing. Background music's fine. And of course, there are a lot of nuances, and people have different interpretations of how these laws are imposed. And the other thing which I have to add is some of the laws are very restrictive when you look at them, but in terms of implementation and their imposition, there's usually a huge divide. And I think that there will be convergence at some stage. Something has to give. And I think that we are seeing a sort of a tug of war between the more pragmatic elements and the hardcore religious types, which is being played out sort of behind the scenes. But yes, I think that we have to navigate and negotiate these things, and this is how we do them on a daily basis. And I think that's why our presence is so important, because if we were to abandon the place, it's going to be more difficult to push back on these issues.
And the other question I wanted to ask, because it is an important question, not only practically, but even academically and intellectually, you mentioned that you still do comedy shows. Now, comedy is, as we all know, comedy and satire and etc. They are, it's always a very slippery slope. You don't the propensity for another party to either take offense or to not like it, etc. Have you felt you have had to make changes since 2021?
Yeah, I think we've gone back to the way we did things in 2005 and 2006. Initially also during the early Karzai years, we were very careful, and we had the sort of historical characters who were sort of represented, modern ministers and so forth. And I think we've gone back to doing it in those, like we did in 2005, 2006. And of course, they do, ridicule some of the stuff that they see on a day-to-day basis. And they've gotten into trouble as well. But I think it's important, and I think people find them, and I think that there are Taliban members who have a great sense of humor, and they're very, I could say, very encouraging of these shows. But I think you have to push the envelope, and I think that's what our folks are doing, despite the restrictions. It's by nature, it's in their DNA to push the envelope. And if I could give you a list of the arrests and phone calls and words that that are spoken to them on a daily basis, I mean, it's you can get overwhelmed in terms of the difficulties that they face, but nonetheless they have, again, it's in their DNA. And Kathy being a journalist and Ali as well, and they know how to continue to persist despite these challenges. And I think, and we're very grateful and very, very proud of these individuals who are on the ground in the front lines fighting on a day-to-day basis.
That goes without saying. They have our greatest admiration. Mahbooba Siraj, would you like to speak now?
Yes, thank you.
So if I can quickly reintroduce you, because we've had quite a few people come in since we introduced. This happens in online events. So just to say that you were until recently director of the Afghan Women's Skills Development Center and founder and president of Organization for Research in Peace and Solidarity, that you continue with your activism and your work, and that you live in Kabul, where you have lived since 2021. You've lived for much longer, but you have continued to live since 2021.
Great.
So please speak now, 6 to 8 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me in this program. It's very important. As Mr. Saad said, that we really have to keep Afghanistan alive in the minds and the hearts and the memories of the people of the world. It's very important. Otherwise, we will be forgotten, and that is not something that is good for us. I have been in Afghanistan since 2003. And what I've gone through as a woman in the past 3 years in this country has been absolutely the most unbelievable experience of my life. Every single day since 2021, that the Taliban actually came to Kabul and Afghanistan was taken over by them, life for the women of Afghanistan as kind of in reality has ceased to exist. What we have is really not a life at all. What we have, it's I don't know what I can call it. It's keeping 20 million people of a country in darkness, closing their eyes, their hearts, their minds, and now their voice. To be not heard, not seen, not talked to, not given any chance, not having any opportunity to actually make something of themselves and be how shall I say, useful members of the society. All of that, we are being erased from the pace of the society completely. But at the same time, we are still alive. The reason why we are alive, actually, and I see it, and sometimes I really wonder it. Number one, I kind of I keep on thinking about the fact that as people, we are amongst the most resilient bunch of people on the face of the earth, especially as women. We really are. Our resilience is something unbelievable. At the same time, this resilience amongst the Afghan women is kind of getting on my nerves, because that is something that is being used and is really nothing being done for us. It's like, yeah, you're very resilient. So it's like, yeah, I do know that. But what is the world, what the world is going to be doing for us? There's not much. And all of the edicts that has been sent by the Taliban authorities, 100 and something of them, 53 or 54 of them were mainly for women. And that was only to women in any shape and form that you can think of. But what is actually happening right now, lately, and right now with this new thing that came up, which has come up, today or yesterday, which is that, the pictures of the live people are not supposed to be shown on televisions and on the screen and talked about or whatever on television. So they're going to start with the television, the Milli, the national television, and they want to stop that broadcasting from television Milli. They just want to change television Milli to radio. It's like I don't understand it. I don't understand this going backwards. I don't understand how come the rest of the Islamic countries are not using these steps to go back centuries towards the darkness of where things were not learned, where things were not done, where things were bad, where things were all in darkness. And how come they are moving forward, and how come we are not? And we are a Muslim country, and every single time when the name of Islam is mentioned, we are all told that it's because of Islam. I don't understand this because I do not believe this is what Islam is all about. But this is what we've been told, and this is how life is going on here. But the one thing that I really want to say, and I really want to say this to everybody, because right now we are kind of running out of time in reality, and we don't have that much time as we thought we did. This is the third year going to the fourth year of what has happened in Afghanistan. And the more we keep on going in this direction, the worse the whole situation is going to be. We are losing a huge number of our educated girls that they were educated up to 12th grade, and they could enter, like, for example, the only one university or the one place that they can go to, which is the College of Nursing, and they can go and study nursing. But they're not going to have any more of those girls available that they have gone through school and they are there and they can go to these colleges. They're not really going to. In another 2 years, that's going to be finished because we don't have any more. And what are we going to do afterwards? What is going to be happening to Afghanistan afterwards? What is going to be happening to all of us, to the women of Afghanistan? This going backwards is too much. It's like taking us to the absolute darkness of the society and the world. And the one other thing that is absolutely, to me, baffling is the fact that where are our men? How come our men are not raising their voices? And how come they are not saying, let's change this. Let's really do something different. It's not going to happen this way. This is not right. The news that we are getting right now, and Mr. Saad said at one point, I would turn on to his television and listen to the news. That was one of the first things I did. Tono TV was always my first source to go to. Sometimes they were completely right or they were not. That was okay, but they were telling everything. And then they were letting me judge which part of this story is right and which part of it is not. At least I could do that. But right now, there's no such a thing. I mean, he's trying to give the news to all of us, and he's giving some news, but it's not news, because what it is like a complete, how shall I say, controlled part of the story that can be told to everyone in Afghanistan, and that's it. And anything more than that is not allowed, and you don't get the answer. And then from the televisions outside of Afghanistan, some of them are absolutely a disaster. So what I get from them is also terrible and disastrous. So we are not having any source of real news to find out what's going on in Afghanistan. And that is really very bad for all of us. For the ones that are outside, excuse me, and especially for the ones that they are inside the country, like me, because I depend on all of that. But it's not happening. And then I'm just wondering, for how much longer is this going to be happening? This is going to be the norm. And the men and the brothers of my country, the ones that they are here in the country or the ones that they are outside, They're going to take one step ahead, bring about a change. Because right now, I want to tell you that there's one thing that I've really noticed. Afghanistan, like the way it was in the beginning when the Taliban came, in the first 6 to 8 months of Taliban arrival, Afghanistan was really ripe for any kind of a change at that time. A lot of things could have happened, but it never did. But right now is also a time like that. If we don't take advantage of this and really join to bring about some kind of a change from within, we are not going to be successful in anything. So this is very important. This is getting very important for the lives of the Afghan women and the Afghan men. Because we cannot wait for the world to bring about changes. They are not going to. The international community is not going to do anything for us. We really have to know that. They are not, because they have their observations, they have their way of doing things, they have their understanding of situation, they have their friendships, they have their handshakes that they have done. They're not going to. But from us inside this country, because where we are going right now is like a point of no return. We are really entering that era. When we enter it once, we get in there. Then for us to come back out is going to be one of the most difficult things that we have done. Because once country goes from the stage of, like, we are getting to that poverty and that kind of a area of economical disadvantage, that once we are there, to get ourselves out is going to be very difficult, because what we have to provide for our people is, number one, is a shelter, number two is something to give them to fill up their stomach. Once you have these two things to be as your number one priority in the development of a country and people, you're doomed. Because then education goes down down the drain, development goes down the drain, any kind of a political or social or economical problems are just disappearing. So this is very important. We really have to think about this and make a point of getting our country back in our own hands and seeing what we can do as the people together. Our diaspora, some of them are dying and outside of Afghanistan. They really want to do good work. But then at the same time, what we are feeling inside is not the same thing. And when I go to the meetings and I tell everybody that my situation, what it is in Afghanistan, honest to God, I cannot really explain it to a lot of people. I really cannot. Because the thing is that if you if you think that the measure is that whether they have killed me or not, no, they haven't. Or the measure is that whether I've gotten beaten or not, no, I haven't. But at the same time, there is no life. There's no life in this country. It's finished. It's really finished for the women. So when that's not there for a sector, for a section of the population, then we are done. Because it's really becoming less and less and less and less. And the way the work is done is not that anytime these edicts come, they're going to implement it in Kabul. No, they start getting implemented in the provinces of Afghanistan, all the way far away in the faraway provinces, and then slowly they move into Kabul. So this is where we are. And I'm just wondering how long we can continue doing this, and how long and when is the calls for our brothers to join in and start doing something right for this country by all of us is going to be answered. I don't understand it when that will be, but it better be soon, because we are really losing big time.
Thank you very much, Mahbooba Siraj. We will surely come back to a lot of the things that you have mentioned, but you have touched upon one of the main things that we are hoping to discuss later on once Ali and Kathy have had their turn to make their remarks, and that is that I'm very glad that you raised the question of the separation of the main urban areas from the other areas. Right. I think you used the word provinces, but we and yes, it is true. And in fact, I was reading somewhere yesterday that I think this whole thing of Jandar, of banning the representation of living beings has been restrictively used already in Kandahar and or has come into effect. So I hear what you're saying. At the same time, one of the things that I think everyone who is outside Afghanistan would be very keen to know is that while the implications of announcing these um, laws, etc., in the long term envisages and imagines something that is, as you rightly said, not just regressive, but actually going backwards. Regressive is something less than that. Regressive, at least to me, is the opposite of progressive. But this is literally
Right.
a
This is something different.
a movement
Yeah.
backward in time.
Exactly.
Well.
Exactly. That's what it is.
But is it equally correct to assume that once these laws are announced, they come into effect immediately or in a blanket way, that women are not going to work, that there are no women who have professions or jobs, etc. Because I, I hear what you say when you say that, and I think you put it very, very well when you say that the textual understanding of this is that women have no life.
Yeah.
But I think part of the importance of understanding the situation is also to know what it is on the ground at the moment, even with, as you said, that Tolo news is no longer the news it used to be. But as Saad said, that even doing what they're doing now is in fact an everyday negotiation. I was struck by the number of times Saad used the word daily. That it's a daily negotiation. It's a daily thing, and there are huge. History is littered with examples of the slippery slope that is created by the announcement of what we call a textual state. So you begin with outlining something textually, and then you slowly begin to realize it, as also the fact that once you codify certain things into law, even if they're not used immediately, they get codified and can be can be appealed to or brought into force at any time, saying, well, this law exists.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. But the point, at the same time, it is equally important to know what is happening right now, and whether the implementation of these laws is either complete or blanket, or is 100% effective, or is this, as a lot of us feel, an indication of the imagination of a certain society and world, and also an indication of possibly things to come in the future. Having said that, you will, of course, have a lot of other opportunities now to come back and respond to these. But can I bring in Ali Latifi, who's a journalist based in Kabul, currently Asia editor at the New Humanitarian. Ali, welcome. And thank you once again for a wonderful conversation I had with you. Please speak now, and you have about 6 to 8 minutes.
God, I kind of don't know what to say now. I guess I'll start back too, because the whole premise of this conversation has been about the vice and virtue laws, and they are laws. I don't think we should try and pretend like they're not laws. Like, the Islamic Emirate isn't a government, and it doesn't issue laws and edicts and such like any other government does. But what I will say about it is that, so for those of us who have access to foreign media, I feel like we found out about it and we started to sort of worry about it sooner than the average person. It reached, in my estimation, I would say there was a few days, maybe a week, between when it reached me and my peers of Afghans who either come from abroad or have access to information from abroad and follow outside news sources and things like that. And essentially people like my family, right? And it was really interesting to sort of see that time period, how it played out. For the first initial days, I remember every single day I would walk out and I would check, okay, are there still women on the street? Are there still people going out? Are there still men dressed the same? Are there still women working in the fields that they can continue to work? are, women and men traveling in taxis, all of these things. I really, every single time I went out, I observed, and to me, that was my way of trying to see what was normal. And when my friends traveled outside of Kabul, so to the other provinces, to the other cities, I would ask them what life has been like, in the last couple months, and they would report back to me. And when I would travel out, and I will have to say that, I mean, we have to be very honest. Life in rural Afghanistan has never changed, right? If we're talking about these so-called freedoms and these advances and our ability to go out and live what would be like semi-normal lives, I'm sorry, that did not exist in the districts of Afghanistan before and in the villages, even in many of the provinces. That is very much an urban phenomenon. It's been an urban phenomenon since my parents' time. And I think for us to expect that it's either magically going to get worse, it's either magically going to get better under US occupation or worse under Taliban rule, it's just a fallacy. It's not possible. It will take a whole lot to change that because those societies have been cut off for so long. They have been so underdeveloped for so long. I mean, even before the Islamic Emirate, I used to travel to Musai district is what, like 30 minutes like southwest of Kabul. Uh, it was incredibly unsafe during the occupation. It's safe now, but there is no difference in the standard of life of the people. It's not as if all of a sudden uh the women are going and becoming accountants or as if they were during the Republic, so we have to keep that in mind. But going back to what I was saying, and then about like say a week later, my family essentially and my friends and all that, they caught on to it. And they told me like, "Oh my God, Ali, do you still go out the same? Do you still dress the same?" I'm like, "Yeah, why not?" And it was interesting because they were so afraid at that point. And then a couple weeks beyond that, we saw that, and again, this is what I'm saying, is that these things in the urban centers, they haven't been implemented for different reasons to the way that we all imagined they would be. One of those reasons is obviously, as Mr. Mohseni said, that the population statistics, it's 40 something million people now. There are simply not enough Taliban to enforce, to come and track every single one of our phones, to come and see what every single one of us is wearing, to see every single person who's in a cab. It's just not possible. You can go entire days without seeing a single Talib, right? Or you can go entire days where you see, 12, 13 vice and virtue in a single day. So it's very much up in the air. And because I've been working on a story about it, and I met with the charge d'affaires of the U.S. mission to Afghanistan a few weeks ago, I was rereading the law, both in Dari and its English translation. And what I found really fascinating about it is that in many ways, it's very specific, but in a lot of ways, it's very vague. And in one of the ways that it's actually very specific is giving orders to the vice and virtue enforcers. It does say, like arrest and such is like the fourth or fifth option. It does say to be more soft. Obviously, we cannot control that. We cannot guarantee that they will act this way, but just having that is important. And just having, whether we like the law or not, whether we agree with it or not, I disagree with a whole lot of it, to be honest. It does kind of put the cards on the table, right? It does kind of show what the Islamic Emirate expects out of society. And by seeing its enforcement or lack thereof in many ways and in many places, we're seeing that the good thing is that it's no longer the 1990s, right? Afghanistan did not just come out of a civil war. Yes, there was an occupation, there was all kinds of abuses and all of these things, but there also was development on the side, and technology caught up in the urban centers with the rest of the world. And the Afghan society in the urban centers, given despite all of the shortages, all of the corruption, all of the violence, all of that still went on and advanced from where it would have been in the 1990s, where people were essentially just accepting what happened. And so I think when we say that Afghanistan is in darkness, nobody has anything, we're actually taking agency away from the Afghan people. Because as Tolo proves, right? Like, who would want to be a journalist willingly at this time? Who would want, at least in the past, they might get to be on commercials, they might get to be on billboards, they might get to go travel the world as famous journalists. Now, I mean, especially if you're a female journalist, you have to wear a COVID mask and hide your face. What is the point? But people do it because they don't want to give in. They don't want to give up. And I think that, unfortunately, a lot of people outside this country are doing a disservice to the people inside by not talking about what is still possible. Something like what is happening with Tolo is a great example, that they still have female reporters, they still have male reporters, they still, I mean, they do have interview programs with government officials where they've asked them about women's education all the time, where they've asked them about women's rights, where they've asked them about, hey, how come, like, you know, my area isn't developed? How come my people, because I'm from a certain ethnicity or whatever, aren't getting what they need? So we have to acknowledge that, and we have to find a way to capitalize on what is still possible before they take away even more. Because the more we say nothing is possible, the easier it becomes for them to take everything away. So yeah, I hope all that made sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. Also, I think an important thing to say over here, which all of you have touched upon in different ways, is that this is not just about women. That laws that directly affect women directly affect the men in the families of the women, and I'm not even talking about those laws that are there for men. So you know, this is a huge psychological and emotional impact on you know, men. The other thing is that, and I think we will come back to talk about this at some point, but it is true that in the urban areas, there are still a lot of women in employment, including in the government, in the administration, in the government. Gender segregation is not unique to the Taliban. Just as it is important to acknowledge what Mehbooba Siraj was saying, is that there are other countries where Islam is the state religion, but they may not be taking things, you know, announcing laws like this. There is also another related question of who interprets religion for whom from positions. So you know, there's a lot, because religion is the practice of religion across the world and across all religions is an individual and private act, and governments and states can give directions, but you know, can they really come and check each and every citizen? And yes, I think the very important fact that, as you said, that even if you travel half an hour outside Kabul, which is a metropolitan urban area, you know, what it has been for the longest time, that you cannot put the responsibility on the current Taliban authorities and so on and so forth. But I think it's important to say also that as often happens, you see, we are now presented with a situation where we all acknowledge the extremity of what is being announced publicly, and the terror that the imagination of that possibility strikes in everyone's mind, as you explained so eloquently. On the other hand, I think you make a very valid and valuable point when you say that the more one conditions one's thinking through fear, the more space you give up for that you can otherwise occupy. And also how people who are living outside Afghanistan, Afghans and others, but in this instance, the Afghan diaspora, how much of their reactions are being articulated and codified in a language that brings out, you know, a furtherance of what may in fact not be true on the ground. Having said that, Kathy Gannon, you have the extreme advantage of being the insider and the outsider. In this, Kathy lives in Pakistan, in Islamabad, but has spent decades inside Afghanistan, was news director of Associated Press for Pakistan and Afghanistan for more than 30 years, was most recently fellow at the Shorenstein Center at the Harvard Kennedy School, and is author of Eyes for Infidel, From Holy War to Holy Terror, 18 Years Inside Afghanistan, which was published in 2006, and is not only eminently readable, but for those of you like me who had the joy of researching even the title of the book, you will see how the title appears in different names in different publications and impressions, which is always a joy for someone like me because I have had a publishing past in my life. But Kathy, thank you very much. Please speak now. 6 to 8 minutes, if you can take up at least some of the issues, and then we will come back to all of it, because I think we have had some very, very interesting perspectives on what is really essentially the same picture. Please speak now.
Yeah. First, thank you very much. And I have to say, I am such a huge fan of Mahbouba, of Saad, of Ali. I mean, really, I listening to each person and their perspectives, so important. I also have to say, I was there between 96 and 2001 when the Taliban first ruled. And as Ali so rightly said, in those 20 years, Afghanistan has changed from 2001 to 2021. There isn't the same ability to control, and people are just willing to listen. But it's very interesting for me, and I'll look at it from the international perspective, because I think the Afghan participants so eloquently explained it from the Afghan perspective. One thing I do want to say, because I was asked to say perception versus reality, I think it has to be said, Afghanistan is an incredibly beautiful country, 40 million people, extraordinary people who had the answer. And they had the answer to make things work the way they wanted to work. The international community, and here's what I will address in my talk, because everyone has addressed so many other things, is so wrong in its approach to Afghanistan. And what is so, for me, always extraordinary, having been involved in Afghanistan since the Russians were in Afghanistan, or the Soviet Union, how the mistakes keep repeating. It's like the very definition of insanity, I think, has been explained, the international policy toward Afghanistan. Between 96 and 2001, Afghanistan was abandoned. It was completely isolated. There were members of the Taliban Council who were very anxious to have a voice, to change the direction. They weren't happy with all the foreigners. They weren't happy with the cutting off of schools. They had no, Afghanistan is, as Ali said, in the rural areas and even parts of the city are very conservative. So segregation of the sexes and everything. But they objected to the lack of education of the doctors, women doctors, and having university courses. And even toward the end of the Taliban's last rule, the women doctors were again being taught at the basement of the 400-bed hospital. So changes were happening. But the isolation of the Taliban gave strength to the very people you do not want, that you would like to withdraw the strength from, and give strength to those within the Taliban who have real desire for something better for their country. And I think the international community, and I'm not talking recognition, and Saad so rightly said as well, engagement is not recognition. And anyway, recognition is a misnomer, because governments today do not recognize governments. They recognize states. And Afghanistan has been recognized since 1927. And according to international law, that, as we well know, doesn't seem to matter too much to anybody these days. But according to international law, in fact, it's more the government that controls most of the country is in fact the de facto government. So whether the world wants to say they are or they aren't makes no difference, frankly. But to go back to first to have left Afghanistan in 2021 was there was no reason why the embassies, the international embassies, had to close. Why did they have to close? What was the dangers that forced them to leave? They had talked to the Taliban, the same people who are sitting in Kabul today, the deputy prime minister of the de facto government today, Mullah Brother, met for 2 years in Doha with the Americans and with other people. So, but then to leave en masse from Afghanistan, and as Mahbouba rightly said, in the first 6-8 months after 2021, there was a real possibility. And there was a lot of imaginations within the Taliban, those who wanted some things, those who wanted to engage more, those who didn't. But the more the international community stays out of Afghanistan and stands in judgment, bullying and demeaning and being disrespectful, the more difficult it becomes for those who want to engage, who want to find something, another way. It might not be the way that the US administration sees it, or the Canadian, or the UK sees it, but to give strength, when you isolate the Taliban by staying out of Afghanistan, you isolate Afghans. You isolate the very people who have the answers, who need that international community. It doesn't matter whether you meet with the Taliban or not, but if the US embassy, there's people there, there's people at the Canadian, 17 embassies or 20 embassies are operating in Afghanistan, and yet no one has recognized the Taliban. So it's not about recognition. There is a mountain of area in between that the international community, the nations can go in. But why don't they? Because they've made it politically untenable within their own governments, because they made monsters of the Taliban. They made monsters of the Taliban. So now the very idea of going back to Afghanistan, engaging with the Taliban, has all this political problems for people at home. So they're not going to be able to so they're because they created the Taliban, made them into monsters. Now it's very difficult for them to convince their own people, even when people within these governments, and I know people who've said, really, we should go back to Afghanistan. They've had to apologize. They've had to step back. They've had to say no. The Taliban are not a monolith. The isolation that the international community is imposing by not returning is giving strength to those who use the isolation to consolidate their power. And as Mahbouba rightly says, it's going to be, they're getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And why do these edicts? It's been 3 years, no engagement. What good has it done? The edicts have been they've been more restrictive. The Taliban, when they last ruled, they wouldn't allow images. You couldn't have music. Afghans love music. Kandaharis love music. They were always getting stopped with tapes in their cars, and so their behavior of using these edicts to control the population, and to the isolation works for them, because those who would stand up or who would want to they're also isolated. They have, where's their strength? Where does their strength come from? How do they show their strength? Even if you're just there, so the world is there. Afghans have the answers. I'm such a big believer that the international community doesn't have a clue, and they showed that from their engagement after 2001, but Afghans do have the answer, but they need to have support and a strength that the international community brings by being there. That allows them to find their strength, to find the answers. And I want to also say, as my time is running out, I agree 100% with Mahbouba. I covered all these demonstrations. The women are out demonstrating. And you go and then you ask the men, so why aren't you there? Oh, very dangerous. I was saying when the Afghan cricket team were playing, not once did the cricket team, when they won a game, say just a voice for their Afghan women saying, you know, something to say, you know, maybe the world should stand up, you know. So the men have to, but it's very difficult when you're all alone. And the international community is doing such a disservice. And I'll just say one last thing. Between 96 and 2001, Mullah Omar and they weren't necessarily geared toward the Osama bin Ladens and that. Haqqanis were, but the people in Kandahar during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, because I was there, they really didn't like the Arabs down in the south that much. So and at one point, Mullah Omar even said, Osama bin Laden is like a chicken bone stuck in my throat. So all I'm saying is that, and there were people who were quite senior on the Taliban Council who wanted to resist. They'd even approached the CIA. But the CIA had no idea. So they, you know, they thought, well, I don't know who these people are. Problem is, when you're away, you don't even know who to talk to. You don't even know who might be able to, need some support. Maybe, you know, can help give some strength. So my whole talk is or my point of view, having witnessed the Taliban when they were there from 1996 to 2001, and again from 2001 to when they returned in 2021. And I have to also say, when the Bonn Agreement was signed and all the same warlords were returned who had brought the Taliban in the first place in 1996 because of their brutal fighting with each other and their corruption. I said to a friend of mine in 2001, I said, you watch, in 15, 20 years, Afghanistan's going to go to hell in a handbasket, and everybody's going to blame Afghans and say, look, we tried to do our very best. And but it really was never about Afghans and Afghanistan. And I think the international community has got to go back, and it has to go back to make it about Afghans and Afghanistan. And that's my talk.
Thank you very much. We have so many perspectives now, all talking about the same situation and the same thing. And at the same time, the very fact that there is a divergence in perception is also representative of what is happening in the country and what is happening outside about the country. Mahbouba Siraj, shall we start with you? Just the discussion. Before that, I was just going to ask Kathy one question, because you used a particular word, which is, you said that the international community made monsters out of the Taliban.
Sure.
If you were to pose this question to the international community, they would probably say what you said towards the end of your talk, which is that your remarks, which is that they imagined the Taliban to be monsters because they were going by what they had seen or known about the Taliban from the first phase of 1999 to 2001.
Yeah, I don't think that's fair. No, I don't think that's fair, because they didn't engage with the Taliban. Between 1996 and 2001, they didn't engage, and the only one who went was Holbrooke. And he went in 2000. And no, they didn't engage with the Taliban, and they kept imposing sanctions and until at the very end, the Taliban had no sources of any income, and then they banned the poppies. So I have to say, they didn't go by what they knew or understood. They made them into monsters, and I'm not saying you don't like their edicts, and I'm not questioning that of course girls have to go to school, and of course, but it's not a monolith. And regressive, yes. Those who want to be isolated, those who want to impose a real strict edict, of course, all those are there, but they are no more monsters than anyone else, and they certainly. You could talk to the likes of Syaf, who in fact brought Osama bin Laden to Afghanistan in 1996. but you couldn't talk to those who came to Kabul in 2021. I mean, there has to be, and there has to be an explanation for why everyone went running in 2021, when for 2 years prior, you were talking to the very people who actually were in Kabul and in August 2021. Sorry, so I didn't mean to disagree.
No, not at all. Please do disagree. Also, I think it is important to say that when we talk of isolation, we are predominantly looking at the West, the collective political West with a capital W. There are countries in the world, powerful countries in the world, that engage with the Taliban, who have a presence in Afghanistan, who continue to build and quote unquote normalize relations with the Taliban. But yes, we are, there is a large part. I think you were very eloquent in saying that even though there are embassies that continue to work inside Afghanistan, they have now simply created for themselves a situation where it is going to be so awkward for them within their own countries to go and engage with the Taliban because of
and not just even awkward, because it's based on lies. I mean, it's not true. They're not monsters. I mean, you can say you dislike their policies and everything, but they're Afghans, and you find ways to engage. You have to, and you have to be there. To sit there in Doha and say, we care about Afghans in Afghanistan. Go into Kabul. Go to open up your embassies. Get back. And you're absolutely right. It is the West, and I just want to make this too, the West, and I include most of the white dominated Europe, America, Australia, has this real sort of self-righteousness about them, where they see they judge countries and leaders by the worst of them, and yet they judge themselves and characterize themselves by the best of them. And yet, let's be honest, the leaders of, the US did go into Iraq based on lies, and a lot of Iraqis did die. I mean, there's a lot of leadership in the West that, people would say, do you really need to engage with them? But of course you have to, it's the West. I'm not suggesting, but I'm just saying it might do the white-dominated part of the world to just step off that so-called moral high ground they seem to think that they have the right to be on, and get in there and talk to people and try to understand and let them, but don't isolate them and think that you can bully them. And I think also the West should know that this promise of recognition and all from the US and Europe and the UK, really, I don't think the Mullah Hebetullah or Sakabar, many of those frankly care. I think the isolationism is really quite working well for them. And so I think the Western perception of what Afghans and the Taliban want, maybe they might try to, and somebody said this in a book, and they should have been doing it back in 2001, is go and talk to Afghans. Go to talk to Afghans, not just the Afghan elite that are in Kabul and the technocrats, but Afghans. Go out and try to figure out, in the villages and try and ask them, what do you want? What do you need? What do you think is the answer? And that was never really done. Anyway, I'll stop talking now.
Maybe we should bring in Saad and Ali and ask them, do you agree? What are your views on what you've heard, Saad, since you spoke? Because I think one important point that is being made is about going back, not just foreign political powers, but also those interested in the country, and they may not be Afghan nationals and citizens only. They could be foreigners, but interested in Afghanistan, much like Kathy, to go back into the country, not only to provide moral support and logistical support, but also to create spaces through their presence of the possibility of conversations and dialogue. I think Ali put it very, very eloquently when he said that through these edicts or the laws or the announcements, whatever you want to call them, one of the most important things is at least you get to know what's on their mind. It's not left to imagination anymore. And I think he said that the cards are on the table. But I just wanted to know, because you, Saad, you are currently outside Afghanistan, but you are on an everyday basis engaging with that country and the government in order to keep the company, the media company and organization going. What is your view on all this?
Well, I think everyone's right. I can't really disagree with any of our fellow.
Saad, that's the worst thing you can say to the chair of the event, that everyone is right. I was just trying to bring some order into it, but why don't you go ahead?
I think everyone is right in one way or another, but let me make a couple of points very clear. Firstly, policies, Western government policies have not worked. As simple as that, all right? And secondly, the Taliban are here to stay. Now, things in Afghanistan can change quickly, but for now, as things stand, these people are in charge. And Afghanistan is experiencing, I would say probably the most peaceful environment for a long, long time. The communist coup d'etat happened in 1978 when I was 12. I'm 58 now. It's been a long time coming, but it's here. And I think if we can take advantage of it, we should. Now, there are no good options. There are a series of bad options that we have to choose from. It's called dealing with the real world. And diplomacy, you go and engage with folks you don't like. And my discussions in Washington or in London or Brussels, or in Germany, it's not your job to judge and lecture us. It's your job to engage. And if you care about the people, you're continuing to litigate against the Taliban, and in the process punishing the Afghan population. I've been meeting the Taliban leaders since 2021, and I have to say that every single one of them, with the exception of maybe one or two, has put on weight. They're looking pretty healthy to me. The sanctions are not impacting the Taliban. It's actually impacting the population, the Afghan population. Now, I think there are a lot of emotions. I mean, I think the Americans were totally humiliated as they withdrew, and they want to punish the Afghan population in the process. And I was in Washington 2 weeks ago, and one of the most, I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of what can be discussed, but I think just to put it out there, because people say, well, in practical terms, what would you do? And I think the sanest thing they can do is go back to the Bonn Agreement. As crazy as this sounds, the Bonn Agreement, sorry, not the Bonn Agreement, the Doha Agreement was abandoned by the Biden administration because it was seen as a Trump agreement, although it allowed Biden to withdraw from Afghanistan. Now, I have had discussions with senior US diplomats, and they basically said, listen, we were told not to pursue the Doha Agreement. In the Doha Agreement, the Taliban have certain obligations and responsibilities when it comes to inclusivity and so forth. It's a good basis in terms of, reigniting or restarting these discussions, these serious discussions. Hopefully with the new administration in January, we can relook at, collectively in terms of how to engage with the Taliban. It is done at a very junior level, an assistant secretary of state, not even reporting directly to Blinken, goes and engages with people on the periphery, and with no freedom to go beyond the usual talking points that they get from the State Department. It's almost embarrassing to listen to these diplomats, because they will tell you privately that we'd like to do more. These people want to travel to Kabul. They want to meet with their counterparts. They want to meet with 42 million people. You're not going to meet their representatives in Doha or in Istanbul and places like that. And why punish the Afghan population? You made so many promises to them. Get back in there. And I think humanitarian assistance is not enough. We need basic needs. We need development. That's the only way you're going to help the Afghan population. And this is going to be the focus, even if it means engaging with the Taliban. Now, the Taliban also, they need a roadmap of sorts. There's so many things get lost in translation. You meet with a Taliban official who's just met with Tom West. The two of them have totally different impressions in terms of what they discussed. And that's why you need ongoing engagement. So the differences in terms of their perception and understanding of those discussions can be ironed out. And they need to meet regularly.
You literally get to know one another.
You get to know one another, and it's really important that, and so many of our, diplomatic friends, they need to study diplomacy, because you talk to the people you don't like. And America today in 2024 is a very didactic, condescending America. It judges a country like Afghanistan based on how it sees itself. And if you look at the Democrats today, they're losing that battle even within the US in terms of their pursuit of certain values, let's call them. But of course, in a place like Afghanistan, I just read a chapter of my friend Tom Freston's biography, and he lived in Afghanistan in the 1970s. It's a deeply conservative society. And as much as we came from the elites, and Afghanistan's literacy rate in 1978 was 8%. This whole thing about miniskirts and things, it's an urban myth. Kabul had a population of 300,000 people, and all the families knew each other. Ali and I usually compare notes in terms of the family connections. I mean, that was it. There was like 8 families, and that's it. So let's get real about it. The last 20 years has been transformative for the country. And these gains have been very important. The literacy rate amongst younger population of Afghans is in the 60s, 60-odd%. Child mortality, the urbanization of the country, huge differences. The country may be conservative. Nonetheless, we've seen huge developments and huge leaps. Now, the Taliban, can they change Afghanistan and take us back to God knows when? Perhaps. But also, the Taliban are being changed by the new Afghanistan. In Kabul and Mazar and Herat, we are seeing changes in their conduct and how they engage. And it's a tug of war, and it's one that we have to obviously push back on. And with Mahbouba, who obviously also knows Afghanistan better than all of us, having lived there in the 70s, she also belonged to one of those elite families. And she was also and continues to remain a champion of women's rights and education and so forth. For the men, I have to defend Afghan men, because the Taliban is a very unforgiving governing body in Afghanistan. If men were to march out, they will end up in prison at best. It's a bit difficult. I think we don't have there is no tradition in terms of protests, street protests and so forth in Afghanistan. And the 2 or 3 times we've seen people protest in the west of Kabul, especially with the attacks on Shia, schools and so forth. It's been mayhem the day after in terms of suicide bombings and so forth. So people are scared, and that's understandable. But all of us, the ones that we can, people like us, we have an obligation to push back where we can. And the pushback comes through the television programming, but more importantly, it's through face-to-face meetings and discussions. There was an Al Jazeera documentary with Mahbouba Sarraj arguing with Zabihullah Mujahid. I think it was impactful. I think that if you speak to Zabihullah Mujahid,
and it was watched by a lot of people outside Afghanistan as well. But
he also admits that she's right, and I think they will chip away at this. I mean, I think that's going to take a while, but I think the push has to come from within. But we also need the world to engage, because the more you isolate Afghanistan, the more you're going to strengthen the most radical elements within this movement, which is not monolithic, as Kathy pointed out.
Sure.
Thank you.
I think there are 2 things that have come across throughout this discussion. One is that, at least for the foreseeable future, the Taliban are here to stay. And the second is that it is not a homogeneous bloc. And even its executors have differences, which actually even those of us who've observed it from outside have noticed in very obvious ways. So if we go back to the question of women's education, the example where it was announced that girls can go back to school, and girls went back to school, and then they suddenly saw that the gates were still locked and they could not go back, and etc. The very fact that there were these sort of differences in understanding even within the country. But I'm going to bring in Mehbooba Siraj now. Of all the panelists, including yourself, you look at the current situation more gravely than others, and if I dare say so, with less hope than others do. And I just wanted to know what you, if you have anything to say in light of what the others have said just now, because as I said after you had made your initial remarks, on the one hand, it is true that there is a sense in which it is an intimation of things to come. On the other hand, it is probably not as bad as many people may think it is in the immediacy, and that if people outside Afghanistan, governments outside Afghanistan, as Kathy was saying, as Saad was saying, engage and begin to engage, there is time and space and scope, and therefore hope for change, because I began with saying the Taliban are at least here to stay for the foreseeable future. What do you think?
Thank you. That's one of my biggest fears, by the way. And the reason why is my biggest fear is because of the way everything is going. You see, the way the world is dealing with the Taliban, the way the Taliban are dealing with the Afghan people, the way the Afghan people are dealing with the Afghan people, the way the world is dealing with the Afghan women, all of that is extremely complex. It really is. And it's not a situation that is very clear cut and is like everybody understands it. What scares me is that as far as the people are concerned, you see, I came to Afghanistan in 2003. In 2003, the results of the Taliban that they left in 2001 and left Afghanistan, it was so obvious in the lives of the people of Afghanistan that stayed with them for years. And those were the years that I worked with the women of Afghanistan, actually. And the effect of the Talibanism amongst the women and the men, it was unbelievably huge. It was like the Taliban were still right there. Because by being in Afghanistan for the few years that they changed the whole perception of the male of Afghanistan towards his female, towards education, towards development, towards everything. We had to start working with every single one of them to make him believe that is, that Afghanistan has the right to be developed. Afghanistan has the right for its women to be educated. Afghanistan has the right to be in the 20th century, then in 20th century, and all of that. But unfortunately, with all of that, and I was the one that I was giving, this whole speeches to everybody about democracy. And later on, I am the one that so regretfully says that I was so wrong. Because when I was giving those speeches about democracy from the people that they were in my country, they didn't do anything democratic in my country. Nothing democratic in my country, nothing very democratic anywhere else in the world that my country was interested. Look at if that's a democracy, what is happening today in Gaza? Look what's happening today in Lebanon. Why does it have to be so fantastically allowed to Netanyahu to do whatever he feels like it? There are hundreds and thousands of deaths that we have everywhere in the Middle East. And these guys, the Taliban, are picking up on every single one of them. And I'm ashamed to say that I was preaching, the democracy for my Afghan people. Right now, the way the situation is, if we don't do anything for the women of Afghanistan and the men of Afghanistan at this point, we are going to enter an era that our coming back is going to be very difficult. And then Afghanistan is going to be from the West, is not even only from the West, even from the countries that they are our buddies right now, which is Russia, and which is China, and which is Pakistan, and which is Iran, and which is all of these other countries. They are going to do this to us also. They're going to throw us somewhere and say, these people are not good, because we are going to be a burden to them. A burden, why? Because we won't have enough education. We won't be able to look after ourselves. We won't be able to do for ourselves. We are going to be always depending on them economically, socially, developmentally, every area. Why? Why do we have to be that? Are the people of Afghanistan stupid? Don't we have any intelligence? Don't we have any capacity? Don't we have any possibility of doing things right? Come on. This is a very, very complicated, very a kind of a sticky mud that we are all stuck in, and it's the people of Afghanistan. What Assad said is really true. Look at the Taliban, their leaders. I swear their stomachs are becoming so huge that they cannot even walk anymore. They can't. They're being big, huge men. And that might not be all from happiness either, because sometimes when people are really depressed, they eat a lot. And maybe that's what these people are doing. Their soldiers are not fat yet, but they will become fat too. But this is, and my people are dying of hunger. This winter, I'm just dreading it. Now the schools, why the women are dying inside my country? They really are. I see them every single day. Sir, I see them every single day. I talk to them. I know their pain. I know where they are going. I know what they look at when you tell them about the future, when you tell them about possibilities. In the minds of the Afghan women, possibilities and future is like the most stupidest nonsense that I can talk about. What does it mean? I don't have food to feed my children, and especially when there is a sickness coming to their families and somebody gets sick. Oh boy. The whole infrastructure of that family on whatever is standing, it comes apart. It becomes like, nothing. We cannot continue like this. I don't know what is going to be happening. I don't know how we should do it. And don't forget about one other thing. The terms of the two presidents of Afghanistan at the time when the Americans were there and the world was in Afghanistan, President Karzai and this other president, Ashraf Ghani, were the nightmares of my life. Because I was seeing everything and how I was looking at it. It was not really good. It was not good for the people of Afghanistan, I swear to you. There was money, there was a development somewhat, but it was only for a group of people. And today, the help in Afghanistan is given like that. The help by the international community is given to the people that they have that mentality, that they know people in the international community. And they can get the money. And they can get the help, and they can run their NGOs, and everybody else, and all of these other women that are working so hard. No, they cannot do anything. So if we continue doing like this, and this gentleman, the whoever they are from the Taliban, they are taking us backwards to the 15th, 16th century. It's just not going to be good for us. How are we going to put up with all of this? I don't understand it. What are we going to do? I'm not going to have any educated people in my country, women, and the women are not educated. The families are not going to be educated. This whole education system for the boys is absolutely collapsing as well. There's no proper education in the schools. I have two boys in my house right now, and they're going. One of them going to high school, and the other one of them is going, in middle school. There's nothing. There's nothing. They're wasting their time. And then there's the madrasas. And then there's so where are we? What is going to be happening? We cannot be going on and on and on and kind of this quagmire of uncertainty. We cannot. We have to find our way. For that, I'm saying the people are supposed to be involved. The Afghan men, the Afghan women, the Afghan diaspora, the Taliban. all of us.
Thank you. Shall we bring Ali in, because what you have said just now is it's everyone is saying that the people within Afghanistan need to not only come together, but hope also to have the presence of other well-wishers. But you cannot wish away a government that is in power. And I dare say, Mahbouba Siraj, that those who are in power today are in power today because some left without announcement. And I say this, but I do also want to say that I wish you wouldn't feel that you are ashamed of what you had said earlier in earlier years about democracy, because I'm sure that when you said so, you said it in good faith.
Yeah.
But what I am saying is I am in no way, saying anything that takes any side. But what I am saying is that we are where we are. And what Kathy has said and what Ali has said and what Saad has said is that now that we are where we are, how do we look ahead and do things within the spaces that are available and create more space, either by pushing boundaries, by conversation, by engagement, because everyone is agreed that the solution to this, the principal place where hope lies, is to engage and not to disengage.
I absolutely agree with you. Absolutely agree with you. And at this point, I want to engage with the Taliban. We have to engage with the Taliban because that's the ones we have. So let's sit down. Let's have a talk about them. Let's do it. But then the world is not making it possible for us. Not at all. The international community here in Kabul is not making it possible. How many times I've asked them that I want us, a group of women, we want to talk to the Taliban leader. We are not going to eat anybody. We are not going to chew them up, or we are not going to do anything. We are women. We understand. We have a logic. We are intelligent, and we would like to talk to them. Why can't they talk to us? Why can't those people arrange for us so we could have a meeting with the Taliban? They're seeing the Taliban every single day, taking pictures left and right, and making it, all over their newspapers. Beautiful. But the ones that they are actually could make a difference, they're not involved. Why aren't they involved? Why can't they involve us? I thought they could do this at least. Can't they? Or they're not?
We are sort of running out of time, but I'm sorry to say that. But I want to bring Ali in to respond to precisely what we're talking over here, which is that what do we do in the current situation so that our conversation remains on the ground?
I think the first thing we need to do is to actually put Afghanistan in context, to understand, as Mr. Mohseni said, that the vast majority of Afghanistan is very traditional. If you don't want to say conservative, it's definitely very traditional. And as Khanum Saraj said, the horrible crimes and mistakes of the occupation and the republic led to the return of the Taliban. And we have to remember that whether we like it or not, the Taliban does have, whether it's 1%, 10%, 100%, whatever support within the country as well. It did in the past and it does today. And we also have to remember that my life in Kabul, my life when I go to Herat or Jalalabad or Kandahar or Mazar is not everybody's life in Afghanistan. It was not always everybody's life in Afghanistan. So we do have to remember that Afghanistan is not Iran. It's not Turkey. There are not going to be women burning their hijabs. There's not going to be, protests calling for secularism or anything like that. The Afghan people do want some level of religion within their society and their government. And we have to accept that, and we have to understand that. And we have to be aware of that. And I think that, so one thing we have to do is really understand what Afghanistan is, because I think during the occupation, this was a big problem. And a lot of these people outside, these former politicians and these activists and all of that, are trying to project an image of Afghanistan that definitely didn't exist in the last 20 years. You know, I've been here since 2013. I've been visiting since 2011. I didn't see that Afghanistan. I saw glimpses of it in our own little bubbles, but that's a separate issue. And I think the most important thing is for people to come and see what is possible and what is actually happening on the ground. And I'll give you a very quick example. In 2022, I was working for Al Jazeera, and we had a team coming from Doha, and they said, "Oh, Ali, we want to go visit a secret school." And I was like, "There's no such thing as a secret school. There are unofficial schools. There are what you would call underground schools, but they are not secret. People know that they exist. The Taliban know that they exist. They're openly existing." And we were taken there by someone I admire very much, who's actually in the United States right now. And it was in the city of Bamyan. We get to Bamyan, we get to a restaurant and the market. And if you've ever been to Bamyan, the market is literally one street. And I call the guy in charge of like setting this up, and I say, "Hey, where's your school?" It turns out it's literally, we were on the right side of the street, they were on the left side of the street. When we get there, me, the driver, and the cameraman, all of us who were Afghan, were angry because there was a giant sign. There were girls coming out in fancy abayas. There was guys coming out. Seemed completely normal. I go to the principal and I'm like, "Mudir Saib, I'm sorry, is your school a secret?" He's like, "What are you talking about, Ali? The governor was just here a week ago." So that's what I'm saying, is like, we need to know what is possible and what can be worked on, and to put our time and effort into that, rather than constantly crying fire and saying absolutely nothing is possible and everyone is dead and it's some kind of a zombie apocalypse. Businesses are still able to operate. Businesses are still able to hire women. Fund them, help them, invest in them. Tolo every day has a new report of a new women-led business, and in Baghlan, in Bamyan, in Herat, and I forget where else, and all these other provinces. If people could invest in those, that would make a bit of a difference. You know, if people come and take their money instead of their speaking fees and whatnot and their trips around the world, and put that money into solar panels for families so that their daughters can study online, you know, to pay their internet bills. There are very practical things that you can do. And like I said, there is still a little bit of a doorway open, but you will only know that by being here and by seeing it with your own eyes, and putting that effort in, rather than traveling the world and giving these speeches about cats and dogs and squirrels and blah, 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 and, you know, bringing Meryl Streep in. Come and invest back in the country in one way or another before every single door closes. Come see things for yourself. See what is possible. See the exceptions that exist. See the difficulties that exist. Because there are many, many difficulties that we all face. The truth is, like, yes, we get away with a lot every day, but the fear is that this will be the day we get caught. I've been wrongfully arrested, so I know what that means, you know? But I still stay. I still encourage people to come. I still try and do my job. Tolo still continues to operate. So my final thought is come, see for yourself, and concentrate on what is possible. Concentrating on what is not possible is useless. It does nothing. It actually makes the situation for the Afghan people worse, because all they hear is this can't happen, this can't happen, this can't happen, and then you have the fake news from these so-called exile media that make it even more worse. So I encourage people to come, and I encourage people to look for opportunities where they still exist before all the doors get shut.
Thank you very much. I'm conscious of time, but Mahbooba Siraj, would you like to say something briefly just by way of closing remarks? You need to switch on your microphone.
First of all, I want to say thank you for having me here. Really, it was wonderful. And I also want to say that I'm not a negative person by no means. I think Kathy knows me a little bit. I'm not a very positive person lately either, but I'm not a negative person. Absolutely not. Because I cannot, if I have all of these negativities and nothing possible in my mind, nothing is going to be done, I cannot get out of my bed in the morning. That I can guarantee. But I'm getting up every morning and I'm going after my job and after the girls that I'm looking after and after the work that I'm doing and all of that. So every single day, it's a battle, really is. Because at the same time, there are all of these negativities and all of these things that are going on. What I'm trying to say is that it's time that we have to change it. We have to change it because we have the possibilities now. I'm not saying the Taliban should not be talked to. I want them to be next to us. I want all of us to sit together. I want all of us to come together and do something for Afghanistan, for the benefit of this country, for the benefit of the people of this country, for the benefit of the young people that are more than 68% of the population. We have to do that. Otherwise, we will not have a country. We will not have an Afghanistan to be able to work for it, to be able to stand by it, to be able to be its voice, nor to do anything for it. This isolation, all of this that is going on is bad for us. So we have to get together and make it possible. We have to work together and make it possible for us to have a future in our lives and a future to the Afghans, that for them, so they don't have to run to the borders of Iran and Afghanistan and Pakistan and everywhere and get shot and killed at the borders. I can't put up with that anymore. I really can't. I'm sorry. That's too much for me. I cannot do it. So this is what I'm trying to say. And if this is negative, or this is what everybody thinks is negative, well then I'm sorry, because I'm really not a negative human being at all. At all.
Thank you very much. I don't think you should say sorry, and nor do I think anyone should think you are negative when you speak for your own country and for the people of your own country. I think then that fault lies on the other side, and it is a fault. Kathy, final thoughts?
Well, I think everyone has spoken so well, and Mahbouba, you spoke from your heart, and you have a wonderful heart. And Ali, I admire everything that you said, and that conversation that needed to be had. I guess I really feel that unless the international community returns to Afghanistan and ends this policy of isolation, as everyone has said, the Taliban are here. So it's how to engage. And so I guess my final words are, the world tried isolating the Taliban. They isolated the Taliban between 1996 and 2001. It was very unsuccessful. And it is mind-boggling that here we are in 2024 and exactly the same policy is happening of isolation, and the same results are happening in terms of the difficulties within the Taliban for those who, because again, it's not a monolith, who have other ideas, and also for the many groups that find militant groups that find a room to maneuver when the space is created, and that then generates a whole other set of problems. So I really think the international community has to understand, particularly the West, and we are talking about the West, they have absolutely no moral high ground on which they should be thinking they can stand, and they have no reason to not sit down and try to get back into Afghanistan and engage with everyone and bring Afghans, not bring Afghans, because I don't believe that at all, but so that Afghans don't feel that Afghanistan is completely a pariah state where no one, even though I know China and Russia and the other ones are there, and that's important. But it has to be on the international, it has to be back in the international community, and then let Afghans come I think Afghans then come together, because they'll find the strength within that to be able to. Anyway, that's just my thoughts. Final thoughts, very final.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much to all of you. I'm sorry, but we are always eventually cut out by time, but that is both literal and metaphorical, by the way. But I did want to say thank you to each of you and to all of you, as well as to those who've been watching this event online. There is one thing that I say, I do these events every week, and there's one thing I say at the end of all the events every week, is that if there's anything good that has come out of the COVID pandemic, it is that we all became technologically savvy and learned how to use Zoom, and which allows us to do these events because these are very important conversations. These are accessible, free to everyone to watch, which is why we do them. And it is very, very important. But in today's instance, I have to say that it has been absolutely amazing and incredible to hear from each of you and all of you. So please accept our special thanks. Saad Mohseni, who has had to leave early because he had a meeting. We have spilled over by 15 minutes. Mahbooba Siraj, you. Ali Latifi, you. And Kathy Gannon, all four of you, for today's discussion, for which we're very grateful. This is a conversation that we will need to keep on having. And I never give up hope in life. So I am sure that we will eventually get to where we all want to for the welfare of everyone. But for the moment, thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you, Sarkar. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Bye, Kathy. Bye, sweetie.